Hi, everyone. I am Giancarlo Guerrero, and it is my great privilege to be the music director of the Sarasota Orchestra. I am here today to introduce you to our very exciting 25-26 concert season of the fantastic Sarasota Orchestra. I could not be more excited to begin this journey with you and presenting all of these sometimes very well-known works, as well as some new surprises that I'm sure you're going to truly enjoy. When I start a season from scratch, being that this is my first official season as music director in Sarasota, I come in usually with way too many pieces. I want to conduct it all. I can't help it. I love music. Programming this season was relatively easier just because of the fact that we have a very important year coming up, 2026, which is the 250th birthday of the United States as a country. Throughout the season, we're going to be exploring this idea of how not only music, but musicians themselves throughout centuries have made their homes into the United States. For my first Masterworks program, we opened with a great work by the American composer Jennifer Higdon, and this work is entitled Blue Cathedral, and it is dedicated to her brother, Andrew Blue, who unfortunately passed away around the time that the piece was composed in the year 2000. She grew up playing the flute, her brother grew up playing the clarinet. You're going to hear throughout the piece this conversation between these two instruments. The soloist for this program is my good friend Alessio Bach, who is a wonderful pianist performing perhaps one of the most popular concerti in the repertoire, which is the Tchaikovsky First Piano Concerto. And then closing out is Sergei Rachmaninoff's Symphonic Dances, which was actually the last piece that Rachmaninoff wrote for orchestra, right before he died. And you'll be surprised to find out that actually one of the last wishes that Rachmaninoff made when he knew that he was very ill is that he wanted to die an American citizen. Both he and his wife were sworn in. This piece in many ways exemplifies all of the influence that America had on him. Our second Masterworks is built around the idea of movies and cinema. When you think of the United States, one of the greatest exports of the country is movies, Hollywood, shaping culture all over the world. The program is really built around perhaps the greatest film composer that has ever lived, John Williams. I'm very lucky because I have had the privilege of working with Mr. Williams and sharing the stage with him as a conductor. When we were going to do our second collaboration, I wanted to do one of his movie scores. And I asked him, Maestro, which one should I do? And he looked at me and said, well, which is your favorite? And I knew exactly the answer. I said, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he looked and he said, it's yours. So I'm always looking for excuses to bring that score out. And I am delighted for this Masterworks. I am doing the suite from Close Encounters. And yes, I will be using my John Williams signed score. So we're opening with another piece that is very well connected to another American icon, which is the movie Fantasia, the great tone poem by Paul Dukat, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Who can forget Mickey Mouse as a sorcerer leading the brooms? The rest of the program includes the most famous guitar concerto, the Concierto de Aranjuez, for guitar and orchestra by the Spanish composer Joaquín Rodrigo, with a dear friend of mine, Pablo Sainz Villegas, and wrapping the program, the incredibly colorful and virtuosic Pines of Rome by Ottorino Respighi. For our February Masterworks, it is a celebration of American music, which ties perfectly with the whole idea of the season tied to the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. This program opens first with a work by the African-American composer Adolphus Hailstork, who lives out on the West Coast and who has had a brilliant career as an educator, pedagogue, and teacher and composer. And I am delighted to be opening this program with an overture that he wrote called An American Port of Call. Also on this program, we will have the George Gershwin Piano Concerto in F, which was actually also his first orchestral piece. And in many ways, this is really the first really, truly successful American piano concerto of the 20th century. I came up with the idea of including a very unusual and kind of a funny work. And it is titled Variations on America, written by the adventurous and very experimental composer Charles Ives. In this variation, you hear the theme, the very recognizable song, America, but then Mr. Ives turns it upside down, closing the program is another great work by another African-American composer, William Dawson. He's actually from the early part of the 20th century. We are performing a work that he titled the Negro Folk Symphony. This was his one and only orchestral piece, commissioned by Leopold Stokowski, the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra. This is one of my favorite concerts of the season, not only in Sarasota, I would say probably in my entire concert season all over the world. It includes one of the most important works in not only symphonic music, but I think in the world. It was a truly earth-shattering piece when it was introduced in 1913, the Stravinsky ballet, The Rite of Spring. It was kind of a break from the traditions of the past and the introduction of 20th century. It is also one of the most difficult pieces ever written. Even by today's standards, it's only available to very few orchestras. And another reason why I wanted to choose this piece is because I wanted to showcase truly the amazing musical talents and abilities of every individual musician in the Sarasota Orchestra. On this same program, we will also have the great young American violinist Ben Beilman playing Mozart's last violin concerto, number 5, known as the Turkish. Opening the program, we have a great work by the American composer Joan Tower, who this year is turning 90 years old. And this work is titled 1920-2019, and it was commissioned by the New York Philharmonic as part of the Project 19, which was 19 commissions from 19 different female composers to celebrate the centennial of the passage of the 19th Amendment, the women's suffrage. For our final Masterworks, I have a kind of an obvious combination, Leonard Bernstein and Gustav Mahler. For this program, I have included Leonard Bernstein's violin concerto called Serenade After Plato's Symposium. Quite the title. It's a work that he did for the great American violinist Isaac Stern. It is a very virtuosic work and, interestingly enough, written only for strings, violin solo, and percussion. No winds. And on the second half of the program, Gustav Mahler's Fifth Symphony. For our first Discoveries concert, which we titled Hidden Treasures, it's a combination of 4 different works by very famous composers, but have one thing in common. They kept getting re-edited and rewritten. And with that in mind, the opening piece is the overture to the opera Fidelio by Ludwig van Beethoven, which was, by the way, his one and only opera, and one that gave him a lot of grief. Next, we have a work by Tchaikovsky, in this case, the variations on a Rococo theme, which is his cello concerto. Tchaikovsky wrote this for a cellist who was teaching at the Tchaikovsky Conservatory by the name of Wilhelm Fitzenhagen. He actually went to Tchaikovsky and said, listen, I don't like how these variations are connected. Maybe we can change and maybe do the second variation. So he completely rearranged it. One of the variations was actually completely dropped out. And that is the version that is played to this day. At these concerts, we're playing the original of what Tchaikovsky wrote. Next, we have a piece by Gustav Mahler titled Blumine. This was originally the second movement of the First Symphony, which is perhaps his most famous, the Titan Symphony. Gustav Mahler conducted this symphony more than any of the others during his lifetime, and he kept revising it, and the biggest revision he made was he eliminated the second movement. So I am presenting to you the lost second movement of the Mahler First Symphony. And then closing the program, Mozart, and his Symphony number 31 in D major, which is titled the Paris Symphony because it was written in Paris. He wrote this symphony for an impresario that commissioned him to write the symphony, and his 3 movements, fast, slow, fast. He premiered this new symphony, but yet he wasn't sure about the reception for the second movement, the slow movement, because, and I quote, the audience did not clap as enthusiastically as he wanted. So he asked himself, should I write another one? The first question you do as a conductor when you want to program the Paris Symphony is, which middle movement do you do? The original one or the new one? We're going to play them both. And I'm going to ask you at these concerts as an audience, you're going to clap along. We'll find out, perhaps at these performances, whether Mozart was right to write another one or maybe the first one was just perfectly fine. Our Finally Discoveries program is called Unfinished Business. And it opens with one of the most famous pieces in the repertoire, which is Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. And it is called that because it only has 2 movements. Why didn't he finish that symphony? There are many theories behind it. And honestly, personally, I think he just forgot. The unfinished symphony was actually found almost 40 years after he died in a drawer, in a desk. It was premiered long after Schubert was gone. Next on this program, we have a very interesting work by an unknown composer. She's an African-American composer, and this is a work she wrote in the 1950s called A Short Study for Orchestra. It's for chamber orchestra. It's a work that kind of explores that musical language of pointillism and using the orchestra as a color palette. Very impressionistic. It shows you the amazing talent of what I think was truly a virtuoso composer. The final work is one of the most famous symphonies by Franz Joseph Haydn, who wrote, by the way, 104 symphonies. Number 45 in the catalog, the Farewell Symphony. In the score specifically, he tells musicians at individual points to get up and leave. It's actually quite funny. At one point, a cello player gets up and goes. And then a violinist gets up and goes. And little by little, everybody leaves. At the end, only two people are left, two violinists, that finish the piece off. The one person that is not specified is the conductor. Why? Because Haydn most likely was conducting it from the harpsichord. I haven't decided when, but I promise you, I will make quite the exit. So I invite you to join us on this journey, and I look forward to many, many fantastic musical experiences together.